Have you ever wondered what led to the downfall of one of history's most formidable military leaders, Napoleon Bonaparte, during his campaign in Russia in 1812? Napoleon Bonaparte, a man whose ambition was as vast as the territories he sought to conquer, made a strategic decision that would change the course of history. His eyes were set on Russia, a massive land of untamed wilderness and formidable adversaries. Napoleon's confidence was bolstered by his Grande Armée, a military force that was, at its peak, over 500,000 men strong. The air was filled with optimism as they prepared to embark on a campaign that was expected to further augment Napoleon's already impressive empire. However, beneath this veneer of optimism were strategic decisions that were to define the fate of this campaign. The decision to invade Russia, the timing, the choice of route, all would play a pivotal role in the unfolding drama. And so, Napoleon set out to conquer Russia, little knowing that it would turn into a catastrophic retreat. But what was the Russian response to this formidable invasion, one might ask? The Russian strategy was an interesting one, and it was called the scorched earth policy. This policy involved the burning and destruction of crops, supplies, and anything else that could possibly be of use to the invading French forces. It was a strategy that forced Napoleon's troops to stretch their supply lines dangerously thin and to rely heavily on a hostile and unforgiving terrain for sustenance. The Russians also made a strategic decision to avoid a major battle, choosing instead to retreat and lure Napoleon further into the vast expanse of the country. The Battle of Borodino was the only major confrontation between the two forces, and it was a bloody and brutal affair that neither side could decisively win. The Russian strategy was a game of patience, a game that would soon have Napoleon chasing shadows. But what was the real adversary that Napoleon's troops faced in Russia? As the campaign wore on, it became quite clear that the biggest enemy of the Grande Armée was not the formidable Russian forces, but the unforgiving Russian winter. The mercury plummeted, the winds howled, and the snow fell relentlessly, turning the battlefield into a frigid wasteland. The soldiers, who were accustomed to the milder climates of Western Europe, found themselves ill-prepared for this brutal onslaught of nature. The winter exacerbated the already dire circumstances. The Grande Armée was woefully undersupplied, with food and fodder becoming increasingly scarce. The troops were forced to forage for anything they could find, often resorting to eating their horses, or even tree bark. The lack of provisions led to widespread malnutrition, which in turn weakened the soldiers' resistance to diseases such as typhus, dysentery, and pneumonia. As if the cold, hunger, and disease were not enough, the Grande Armée also had to contend with the constant harassment by Russian partisans. These hit-and-run tactics, coupled with the harsh conditions, took a heavy toll on Napoleon's troops, decimating their ranks and crushing their morale. In the face of such adversity, Napoleon made the fateful decision to retreat from Moscow, but the retreat proved to be no less harrowing than the advance. The soldiers trudged through the snow, battling frostbite and exhaustion, all the while pursued by the relentless Russian forces. The once mighty Grande Armée was reduced to a ragged band of survivors, a far cry from the formidable force that had marched into Russia with such pomp and circumstance. The Russian winter had proven to be a formidable adversary, one that Napoleon had grossly underestimated. The elements, rather than the enemy soldiers, were the true victors in this campaign. The Grande Armée, once considered invincible, had been brought to its knees, not by the might of the Russian forces, but by the sheer brutality of Mother Nature. As winter closed in, the invincible Grande Armée was brought to its knees not by Russian soldiers but by Mother Nature herself. So how did the mighty Napoleon handle this setback? Well, let's dive into the retreat from Moscow, a desperate journey that would prove costly for the French army. As Napoleon's forces began their retreat in October of 1812, they were faced with the brutal Russian winter, the same one that had previously claimed many of their comrades. The army was in tatters, plagued by hunger, frostbite, and disease. Every step away from Moscow was a battle against the elements and the relentless Russian soldiers who pursued them. The losses were staggering. Of the 600,000 men who had marched into Russia, fewer than 100,000 made it back to France. This was a devastating blow for Napoleon, who had built his reputation on his military prowess and the loyalty of his troops. Upon his return to France, Napoleon was met with shock and disbelief. The French public had been led to believe that the campaign in Russia was a success, and the news of such a catastrophic defeat was a bitter pill to swallow. Napoleon's image as an invincible military leader was shattered, and his political position was significantly weakened. The aftermath was swift and unforgiving. The defeat in Russia led to a loss of faith in Napoleon's leadership among his allies, leading many of his satellite states to switch sides. This, in turn, set the stage for a coalition of European powers to rise against Napoleon, leading to his eventual defeat and exile in 1814. The impact of the Russian campaign on Napoleon's career cannot be overstated. It was a turning point, a moment when the tide of fortune turned against him. The man who had once seemed invincible was now vulnerable, his aura of invincibility shattered. Napoleon's campaign in Russia, a campaign that started with a vision of grand conquest, ended in a disastrous retreat, marking the beginning of the end of the Napoleonic era. So, what can we learn from Napoleon's failed campaign in Russia? The tale of Napoleon's Russian campaign is a grand narrative, brimming with lessons that resonate even today. The first lesson we can draw is the importance of strategic planning. Napoleon, a master strategist, underestimated the sheer size of Russia and the difficulty of supplying his Grande Armée over such vast distances. Second, understanding local conditions is paramount. The harsh Russian winter decimated Napoleon's army, a force that was ill-prepared for the brutal weather conditions. Third, the unpredictable nature of war is a reality that cannot be ignored. Despite his grand plans and ambitious vision, Napoleon could not predict or control all the factors that eventually led to his downfall. In essence, the tale of Napoleon's Russian campaign is a cautionary tale for leaders and strategists, emphasizing the need for careful planning, understanding the terrain, and respecting the unpredictable nature of life and war. Napoleon's campaign in Russia serves as a stark reminder of the limits of ambition, the importance of strategy, and the harsh realities of war.